So shame is a really interesting thing because when I think about conscious sexuality and what that looks like, it's not to be in a specific container. It's not just for marriage. Like it's have you uncoupled your relationship with shame and sexuality, and to me that's conscious sexuality. So can you have sex where you and your partner are doing it together, you're concerned about their pleasure, they're concerned about your pleasure, you're not worried about like if my belly looks weird in this position or my face looks weird, it's like is this bad, right? So all of that is stripped away either entirely or you're doing the work to get most of it abolished. And people will automatically conflate being in a monogamous long-term relationship as healthy and the standard. But I have talked to so many people that are in that, and they either have never had an orgasm because they're not comfortable even having that conversation of what they like. They haven't been able to touch themselves, look at themselves. How many women have never looked at themselves because it's dirty and it's wrong? And to me, there's just, everyone has a lot of work to do when it comes to the shame element. And what I learned, what book was this? It was talking about the origin of the very first Latin word for pussy. And it was the same as shame.
Right.
Because the man is out and he's exposed. So that's pride, something that to behold. But the woman's is tucked away, so it must be dirty and wrong. So shame, shame, shame. So from like basically the first time that we started speaking, we have instilled this in every single layer, specifically for women, but men now too.
Yeah, I mean, there were so many things I wanted to just, respond to as you were talking. So first of all, what strikes me so hard is, you're in North Carolina, I grew up in India, and the experiences are the same, right? I know exactly what you said. So many couples that the woman does an orgasm, they're ashamed to talk about it, they don't know what their bodies look like, all of that kind of stuff. And at the same time, when you look at how we all got here, all these different cultures, I don't entirely know yet. So I know that in India, we like to blame everything on the British, right? They colonized us for 200 years. They're like, well, it's Victorian morality. But I don't think so. And India, remember, is the culture that gave us the Kama Sutra. And the Kama Sutra is really interesting because all these fantastical sex positions and all this real education around pleasure is meant to be in the context of a partnered relationship. So the Kama Sutra is not about go out and fuck everybody. And who cares? I don't care if you do. But the idea that you have to work at sex. You have to work to make sex interesting and innovative in a long-term relationship is thousands of years old. And yet we think that we're going to spend, 90% of our time working, 10% of our time on our spiritual development and leave there's nothing, 90%, there's nothing left for our intimate relationships. Of course we're going to be lonely. Of course we're going to be in an intimacy crisis.
So when it comes to working on that relationship with shame and just sexual exploration, do you find it easier for people to work with that by themselves initially with their partnered couple or both?
I think I always say sexuality is an inside job. So personally, I work with individuals.
Okay.
Because I think that you get in a partnered relationship, you may get lost, and I think this work has to be done individually, and that's where the spirituality piece comes through. From there, you can spring dive into any sort of permutation and combination that you want, but I think the work has to be individual.
So where does that start? How do you start?
Yeah, so it's interesting, right? So, I mean, as you said in my talk earlier, I talk about sex, shame, and spirituality, and to me, one of the most powerful ways to overcome shame is to adopt this spiritual mindset. And we have to be very clear that spirituality is different from religion, especially in the context of sexuality.
Can you decipher the difference?
So there's a framework that I like by a couple of researchers, and I'm happy to give you their names so you can reference the article even. But it's essentially, in religion is sort of community driven, right? It's upheld by the community. It's upheld by your social structures, whereas spirituality is much more individual. It is individual, it is unique, it is personalized to you. Religion is given by scriptures, right? There's the Bhagavad Gita, there is the Bible, there is the Quran, so on and so forth. Whereas spirituality is intuitive. It sort of comes from within. It's those voices, it's those messages that you get from your relationship with the universe. And then the third piece, which is a very important piece, and all spiritual philosophies around the world have this, is this idea of unification and oneness. So religion will tell you that there's a divide. There is God and devil. There is faith and or vice and virtue. There's sin and I don't know what's the opposite of sin. Not sin, sex,
Sainthood.
whatever it is, right? And the whole point of spirituality is that there is no division. I mean, if you really go into quantum learning, this is, we're all made up of energetic particles, right? The difference, what is matter and what is particle is just an illusion. So those are the three sort of tenets that I work with. So how does that apply in a sexuality content? It's like, all right, listen, you have a right to have a sexuality that is spiritual in that it is unique and individual to you. It is intuitive and driven by your own system, your own body, your own dialogue with the universe. And you are allowed to lean into oneness instead of division. Whether that means that you are willing to extend yourself and learn about a culture or a community that makes you uncomfortable because there is no division, or if you just let those boundaries within yourself fade away. And that's the work. That's the powerful work.